So we will use the microphone then. So you'll see us kind of just going back and forth. But again, we're thrilled to be here, and thank you so much. Thank you, Andy, and Jean for inviting us out here and being part of your birthday celebration and part of the community. Because I'll tell you, yesterday I felt like we were everywhere. I felt like we went all the way up to north to south, but we actually didn't. It was just Hoboken, right, Andy? So we went over there, and then we were in Westfield, and we saw the amazing work that you're doing for your homeless veterans. And thrilled to see all that good work that's happening, because it is just real. I didn't know about that. And I was really excited to see that. And excited to see that New Jersey has really come together I know you've always helped veterans, but for the homeless as well as suicide prevention. So thank you again for having us here. I'm Wendy Laxo with the Columbia Lighthouse Project and Columbia University. My colleague will introduce himself in just a minute, but I just want to say Dr. Kelly Posner is our director, and she is thrilled that we're able to go around and really team up and truly partner with the Legion to bring this training to you. We have been given a grant through through USAA, Face the Fight Coalition. We're part of Face the Fight Coalition, and really what that is that's a group of veteran service organizations, large companies have pulled together and provided funding, and we're in our second grant year. We've been invited back to a third year round of grants. Not guaranteed we're going to get one, but I think we will, that will help continue this effort. So as part of Face the Fight Coalition, I mean, we are really trying to come together and decrease veteran suicide. So like Andy said, my husband, it was 30 years Army. Anybody here Army? Okay, I like to see that. Although I love all services. My dad was Navy. Okay, there we go. Our older son spent 6 years in the military in the Army, and our youngest son right now is in Fort Bliss. So serving. Yeah. So he's serving there. And I spent, I don't want to say how many years serving for suicide prevention, but I was the chief of the Army Suicide Prevention Program. Went up to DOD, went up to VA, or I should say over to VA, and then also worked with the White House to put together a plan for the nation writ large to decrease veteran suicide. So that being said, you know my background now. I'll turn it over to Dr. Adam Walsh.
Hey, good morning. It's wonderful to be here. It was amazing to see all the work yesterday, especially around preventing and trying to keep veterans off the streets and really helping with the homeless. Before I got involved with the military research, I worked very closely with homelessness and homeless vets in North Carolina. So it's very, very important work. So it was wonderful to see that yesterday. So you guys have a high bar to compete against. About a month ago, I was in Floribama. I've never even heard of that. That's a new concept for me. So I guess it's on the border of Florida and Alabama. It's on the coast. And we went and did a training there at the American Legion, and we did this Be the One training. And after I was done doing the training, everybody was so excited. It was freezing that day. It was in February. It was really, really cold. We were on the beach, and the American Legion members, they were so excited, they took their Be the One flag, and they ran out to the ocean, and they jumped in the ocean. So they were so excited. So I don't know what you all are going to do, but that's a pretty high bar. So I was really surprised. So, the Jersey Shore is not that far from here. But a little bit about myself. I worked very closely with the Marine Corps. In 2000, you got a Marine, good. I think we got them all covered now.
Air Force.
Air Force, okay. So 2012, I was the chief of suicide prevention for the Marine Corps. Also helped stand up community mental health centers for the Marines. So I got really close to the Marine Corps and also studying suicide attempts, and had a chance to do a lot of work with them. And then actually went over to the Office of the Secretary of Defense Suicide Prevention Office, and was in charge of research and program evaluation for all the military for suicide prevention. So hopefully what we can do is give you a really nice perspective on suicide prevention. I'm also a licensed mental health clinician. I've been able to approach suicide, been very fortunate, been able to do work all around the world. So hopefully we can give you some different perspectives on suicide prevention. What we can tell you is that unfortunately the suicide rate, civilian population, military, veteran population, is not going in the direction that we want, so we need new approaches. And one of those approaches is what we're doing here today. And that is teaching you all, because what we've learned in doing all these trainings around the country with the American Legion is many veterans who are going through issues, they really want to talk to one of their own. They want to come to a post, they want to talk to you all. So this is a great opportunity, because what we know, unfortunately, is that a lot of veterans, they suffer in silence. They're not going to raise their hand. They're not going to come to the clinic. They're going to be out, in society, out in the community, and we need to reach them, because many times they're not going to come to somebody like me in a clinic. Okay, so this is very important. All right, so we do have some stats here for you. In 2022, there was close to 50,000 suicide deaths in the United States. This is all in general population in the United States. And in the United States in 2022, unfortunately, actually 2023 was the highest rate of suicide ever recorded in the United States. So again, as I was saying earlier, we need to come up with new approaches, new ideas to bend the curve down for preventing suicide. And in 2022, there was about 6,407 veterans that died by suicide. And that was a slight increase of 15 deaths from 2021 and 129 from 2020. And it's the second leading cause of death for veterans under age 45. And then the other thing that we've become more aware of is the older veteran population. So the rate for veteran ages 55 to 74 increased by about 4.4%. And then the rate for veterans 74 and older, it increased by about 5%. And then also, this is something that we're again becoming even more aware of, is that caregivers. So 31% of caregivers had considered suicide in the past 30 days. But there is some good news that we've really, in the last 4 or 5 years, I know when we were also at the Department of Defense Suicide Prevention Office, we were really trying to focus on female military service members and then transitioning into the veteran population. In 2022, the female veteran suicide numbers and rates went down actually considerably by 80. So 80 fewer women veterans died. So that's good news. And in New Jersey has a significantly lower suicide rate, a veteran suicide rate, than compared to the other states in our country. So that's good. So you all are doing something different and better. So that's very good. And so your suicide rate's about equivalent to the general population or the civilian population. So that's good news. Next slide. Okay, so everybody always wants to know, so who's at risk? There's not just one single risk factor. There's a lot of risk factors. There's a whole constellation of risk factors. And we like to use this spiral because it brings together and combines a lot of different risk factors for suicide. And these are all, many of them are situational. Some of them, have been there for a while, but many of these risk factors can come and go very quickly. But some of the ones that have usually kind of stayed around for a while for people are a history of physical or sexual or emotional abuse. That's something that we know many service members, they may have kind of brought that with them into the service. So maybe there was some child abuse or maltreatment before they got into the service. I think one of the things that people sometimes falsely believe is that it's only deployment. It's only military deployment that has caused some issues for service members or veterans. But it's the whole of life experience. It's a lot of things that could have happened to that service member or veteran before they came in or in relationships. It's not just hooked to deployment. So that's really important. Mental health issues, a prior suicide attempt, substance abuse, those can increase risk, but not by themselves. It's a combination, and it's a spiral. And then disrupted social network, the transition of going from being in the service to being a veteran, that is a high-risk period, especially if we don't know exactly why, but all this research that we've done has showed that service members who have been other than honorably discharged have a much higher risk of suicide. And that could mean a lot of different reasons, as we know, understanding other than honorable discharge. Oh, came back, all right. So that's an interesting thing to think about, is when you talk to veterans, obviously sometimes it can be kind of a personal thing of how they were discharged, but that's one thing that having conversations with them about, how were you separated, and understanding that's an important conversation to have. And then this transition, many times your social network, you have your buddy to your left and your right, your battle buddy, you have your mission, you know what you're going to do every morning when you wake up, and then you transition out into the civilian world, and it's kind of a shock to the system. Your job, many times have to find a job. Again, your social network has changed, so it's a very critical time. Judgment factors, we all need sleep. If you're not sleeping, it's hard to make good decisions. It's hard to deal with emotions. It's hard to deal with life. So it's very important to have sleep to be able to keep ourselves in the best position that we can. And then alcohol, anger, being able to deal with anger and strong emotions is really important to preventing suicide. And then stressors, we have those kind of acute stressors, so relationship problems. I know in a really interesting study that we did in the Marine Corps on Marines who died by suicide, what we found is that about 90% of Marines who died by suicide had a failed relationship, an intimate partner relationship, 24 hours before their death. So a huge breakup. And so that's really important, is understanding, yes, mental health is important and understanding that, but relationships, financial issues, work issues, some of these environmental kind of life stressors can really increase risk for suicide very quickly. Because today, things could be okay. Tomorrow, what if you lose your job? What if, your wife decides to leave you, or your husband does something, or your relationship goes away, or something happens to your child? Then all of a sudden, your level of risk for suicide can change drastically. Then we have health issues. So physical pain. We know a lot of veterans are dealing with a lot of physical pain as well, and that can certainly increase risk for suicide. And then we have impulsivity. You'll find later in our training that thinking about suicide and acting on it can happen pretty quickly. And then shame and guilt and hopelessness. Those are all rejection, feeling abandoned. Lots of things can all kind of coalesce together. Okay, so protective factors. So it's really important to understand risk, but what protects service members and veterans against suicide? So having hope, belonging to organizations like the American Legion, feeling connected to one another is really important. Family support, employment, a job, something that gives people purpose. These are all really good protective factors. Access to good health care, mental health care, social connectedness. There's a really nice research study that over the last 20 years, the number one thing that protects people in general, but also veterans, is being connected socially. Feeling connected to other people is the number one thing that protects people against suicide. If there's one person that has your back or is there for you, that means a lot to somebody. So again, you all being here and you being an American Legion and being around other veterans, that connection can really protect people against suicide. Can anybody tell me what they think is the day in history in the United States that was the lowest day for our suicide rate in our country? Any guesses? 9/11. By far. Somebody said that? All right, awesome. is by far the lowest rate of suicide, the one day, single day, ever recorded in history in the United States. And why do you think that is? Well, banding together, all banding together, all being together. Absolutely. So that always reminds me, you know what? We got to stay together. We got to stay connected, because it's truly a very powerful tool to protect against suicide.
So what we want to do too, I'm just going to add to this, what we want to do too is make sure that we are bolstering that green side, right, of protective factors, because that's what's going to keep us safe.
All right. So a lot of people will say, well, how do people get to the point where they want to think about suicide or attempt suicide? A lot of people say, you know, it's very complicated. And as you could tell with all the different risk and protective factors, it can be. However, what we've done, lots of people have come together over the last about 10 years and tried to really condense down two major pathways that people go down to the point where they're thinking about attempting suicide or taking their own life. And the first pathway is stopping the pain. When I did some studies with the Air Force and also the Marine Corps, Marines that attempted suicide and survived, we talked to them and said, well, why did you attempt suicide? Almost everyone, also the Air Force study, because I wanted to stop the pain. What do you mean by that? I wanted to stop the relationship pain. I wanted to stop just this horrible feeling of emptiness. I just wanted it to go away. I wanted my physical pain to stop as well. So that's why I attempted suicide. Loneliness, the pain of loneliness. I just wanted it to stop. So stopping pain. How can we stop pain? It's not as straightforward as you think. Pain can manifest, come up in different ways. So economic, if you can't pay your bills, that's pain. It's hard if you're just barely getting by. Again, I've heard some really amazing stories how the American Legion helps each other. You always got each other's back. If somebody's struggling, you help them. That's really important. Access to really good care, feeling, again, connected, really good coping and problem-solving skills. Service members are awesome at solving problems, right? You know, fixing things, fixing the computer here, really good at fixing issues. But sometimes you might need help with, you know, fixing a relationship problem, or maybe, you know, some issues like financial. We all need help with some of those things. And then the Columbia scale, it protects against, it helps stop the pain, because what it does is it allows you to connect to somebody and reach out to them and ask that difficult question about, you know, are they thinking about dying? Are they kind of in a point where they kind of want to give up on life? That question and reaching out to somebody can really stop that pain. The other pathway is kind of, some people think it's kind of a simple way, is you make it harder. You make it harder for somebody in that moment, because we know for most people, going ahead, thinking about suicide and attempting can be very quick, and sometimes it can be very sudden or impulsive. And so you try to make it harder for that person in that moment to die. So we want to make sure the method of suicide in the United States, in the veteran population here, about 73% of veterans who die by suicide use a personally owned handgun. So we think about that method. It's not about taking away guns or Second Amendment. I grew up in Nebraska. We like our hunting. We like our pheasant hunting with shotguns. We all, Wendy and her family, you have firearms, but you secure them to make sure that it's harder to access that gun in that moment where somebody's in crisis. If we were in another country, if I was in Japan, we'd be talking about guardrails on subways or trains. If I was in Indonesia, we'd be talking about poisons, fertilizers. There's some really good effective ways to make it harder for somebody to access a method of suicide when they're in crisis. Also the media, the way we talk about suicide, it makes it less, you know, kind of acceptable to think about suicide. We need to make sure that we're not glorifying suicide, and that we're using the proper terms. We always, probably have heard me say died by suicide many times. It's not commit suicide. It's not a successful suicide. When you think of the word commit, most people think committing a crime or committing a sin. So we actually know, again, from a lot of research that if you start saying commit suicide and somebody's thinking about suicide, then they may not want to talk to you because they think, oh, you think I'm going to commit a crime or commit a sin. So we got to be very careful with the words that we use. And successful suicide, there's nothing successful about a suicide. Or a completed suicide, that's not a term we want to use either, because it's not completing something that's positive. So we want to make sure that the words we're using are right. We also want to normalize help seeking. It's okay to ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness. It's okay to raise your hand and say, I need some help. Yeah.
We worked on this a lot.
So we nice thing to educate people about is the difference between a medical model versus a public health approach. So a public health approach to suicide is what we're doing today, and what we have found all around the world is the most effective way to prevent suicide. So we don't assume that everyone who dies by suicide has a mental illness, and that the only way to prevent suicide is through medical interventions. We know that the community, everyone has a role in preventing suicide. I think I heard this earlier this morning when you were all talking, that everybody plays a role in preventing suicide. And that's more of a public health approach. And that's what we really need to embrace. We can no longer think that suicide's a medical issue and it only can be cured in a hospital. It can actually be prevented in the community. All right, so this is a good slide to understand about why do veterans have such a hard time asking for help. And what we've done lots of studies when we were in the military population, but also in the veteran population. And what we find, there's top reasons for why service members and veterans don't ask for help. And the number one actually is not on here. It's kind of a newer finding, is service members and veterans want to fix their own problems. They don't want to ask another person to help them, because if you think about it, and I really learned this when I was really close working with the Marines. They would tell me, hey, look, Doc, I'm downrange. I'm all by myself. I'm the one that people are looking to fix their problems and to fix a Humvee or to figure out how to get the bad guy. I have to do that on my own. So I have learned, that's the Marine Corps ethos. The warrior ethos is to do things on my own. So now you're asking me to ask you or somebody else for help. I don't do that. That's not the way I was trained. So now you have to try to really think through that with service members and veterans. It's like, no, you're not alone, and I can help you, and it's okay. You don't have to fix everything on your own. You think you can, but there are certain problems in this world that we all need help with. Another one is the perception of being broken. Veteran service members, you don't want to admit that you might need some help. But we actually know that standing up and being a role model to others, saying, I do need help, that is definitely a huge sign of strength. And then confidentiality concerns. So a lot of service members believe, if I ask for help, then somehow I won't get a job, or, in the military service, their security clearance would be pulled. And we know that, it's really important still to ask for help. That's really, really important. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Wendy.
So I saw a lot of head nodding when Adam was talking about some things that he was talking about. I want to say, too, that if there's barriers to seeing the slides, just move your chairs. We're good with that. But the one thing we had talked about, social support, right? Social support, really helping each other. And what's so important about that is that peer support. We talked about buddies, right? And the buddy checks, which are so very important. And I'm so glad that the Legion does that. But it really increases help when you're there, because we also know that veterans, when they do open up to somebody, who are they going to open up to? Right. They're going to open up to their peer. They're going to open up to their family. They're going to open up to their friends. And that's why we talk about a public health approach too, instead of just that medical model. So really, when you're there, peer support and having that support by a friend or family or the Legion, goodness, I just love what you're doing, because that is full social support that you're doing for each other and that you're helping each other. And really that reduces visits to the ER, that decreases hospitalizations. It links people at risk to resources too, right? So we'll talk about this too when we talk about the tool that we're going to go into, the Columbia Protocol, is that what are those resources out there? And if you don't know resources around your area here, your local area, get to know them a little bit, because you are also that link to help other people through resources that you may know, and you can get them help. Okay? Hey, slide checker. Thanks. Do we have any police officers or firefighters in the room? Great, great. Very, very similar, right, to our veteran population. Matter of fact, there's a lot of veterans that are firefighters and police officers. And I know we actually added this slide because our next community in Rahway, there's going to be some firefighters there, and the fire chief was really excited about this program, and some police officers. But very, very similar. That peer support, really, that peer support is what can help an individual work through some issues where they may be feeling like taking their own life. I want to ask too, I think there was somebody that raised their hand, the Cop to Cop program. Does anybody know about that? Has anybody heard about that? We found this actually yesterday doing some research in New Jersey. That is a 24/7 call center just for police officers. So I think it's great. So if you're friends with police officers, make sure that they're very aware of that. So I'm going to go into some misconceptions and facts. And there's a couple of reasons why I do this. One, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there, right, about suicide. The other reason is because sometimes misconceptions stop us from helping others. So we always think about it being a barrier for somebody to get care, but it also can stop us from helping some others. So I want to kind of go through things in that. I'm thrilled you're getting the bags. Good, good. Feel free to dig through while we're chatting. That's fine. Okay. So when we talk about suicide, a lot of people think that, my goodness, if someone's talking about suicide, they're going to die by suicide. What we want to make sure that we know is that most people who think about suicide do not die by suicide. And our emotions are not singular to where when you're thinking about suicide, you're always thinking about suicide, right? Just like our emotions that go up and down and ebb and flow, so do those suicidal thoughts. So somebody who thinks about suicide doesn't always go to die by suicide, okay? I do want to say, though, that we do need to take things seriously, though, if somebody is thinking about suicide. Because this is why we do have the tool, and this is where you can come in and intervene and get that individual help, because there were over 12 million people have thought about dying by suicide, and I want to say it was 8 or 9 million. Do you know the stat that actually attempted? So when we look at those, no, maybe it was less, I'm sorry. Yeah, it was it was less than that, but it was like 1 point something million had actually looked at attempts and attempted suicide. So if you think somebody may be suicidal, it is very, very important to try to talk with them and get them help and support. So this other one, only clinicians should work in this field, in suicide. Adam said he's a clinician. How many clinicians do we have out there? Oh, we do have a couple. Wonderful. I am not a clinician. And I have worked in suicide for many years, leading the Army program, working at the Department of Defense with Adam, side by side to work on this issue. So I'm not a clinician. So you do not need to be a clinician to help somebody who may be suicidal, okay? Now, To treat somebody who may be suicidal is a different thing, right? Then you should be a clinician, but not to help somebody and support them. So owning a firearm is associated with suicide risk here in the United States. And as you heard Adam talk, we talk about firearms specifically because not about Second Amendment rights or anything like that. We have firearms in my home. I love to shoot. So it's not about that. It's about that is the number one means that somebody dies by suicide, most lethal means here in the United States. Adam had talked about Japan and how they were using trains, right? I was in Scotland, same thing. I went there last year and I talked to them about bridges. It's the difference, right? Is that in Japan, we talked to them about trains, and now they have those safety nets, and it is decreasing. It's being shown to decrease suicide rate now. Their numbers are going down. In Scotland, I was talking to them about bridges because that was their number one lethal means of dying by suicide. So where we're at is the means that what we talk about, and that's why we talk about firearms here. Okay. About 70% of all veterans that end their life by suicide do it through a firearm. Again, same thing. So if you remove one access, kind of on the same talk that we were just saying, when you remove an access to a lethal means. So if somebody is looking to die by suicide or take their life through medication, if you remove that, most often they're not going to go on and use another means. So we've seen that, right? When we're looking at pesticides in Indonesia, when they removed that means, their suicide numbers dropped. Same thing in Japan right now, right? With the safety nets around the trains. Their suicide numbers are dropping. Okay.
And one
Yeah.
other thing really quick with that is there's an interesting, and we have a friend who jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge, and he survived. And there's about 40 people over the last, 50 years that have jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived. And none of those people have died by suicide. Some of them have died by natural consequences. But one of the things that we want to emphasize is if you can go ahead and intervene and help somebody when they're in crisis and make it more difficult to access a means of suicide, more than likely about 93% of those people will never go on and attempt suicide again.
See, this is why I love training with Adam, because the research in him has all this great data, and it's rich data, so I love it. So thank you, Adam. Suicide is impulsive. Suicide is very impulsive. We talk about less than 10 minutes. We know really sometimes it's less than 5 minutes, right, that somebody's thinking about suicide. So when you think about that spiral chart that Adam showed with all those risk factors, we knew working in the Department of Defense, we did lots of studies on this, that it's just not one means or one reason why somebody dies by suicide. It can be a compilation, and it can be something that triggers the individual, right? That moment, that day, whatever it may be. Like Adam was talking about relationship issues, right? Someone could come home or come back or something happens and their spouse or significant other leaves them. That could be the thing that makes somebody think about dying by suicide. So keep that in mind. It is very, very impulsive. So again, going back to the fact that if you feel that somebody may be suicidal, it is very, very important to sit down and talk with them and get them help if needed. I'll also talk about that time and distance because we talked about that a lot in the Department of Defense. It's actually, I think we kind of might have come up with that, or we did come up with that. Putting time and distance or time and space. Has anybody heard about that? Okay, perfect, good, because it's kind of on the same concept, right, about the lockbox and keeping your firearm safe, keeping your ammunition separate from your firearm as well, right? And we know through research that, is that wind? oh, okay. I was like, woo, the roof's going to fall. No, we knew through research that if you can just have that time between somebody who may have a firearm and their ammunition, or the firearm in that lockbox, right, and their ammunition, then that time really gives them a moment to think about what they're going to do. And sometimes it has shown to stop them from doing that. So that's important. Talking about suicide will lead and encourage somebody to die by suicide. A lot of people think this is still true. This is completely a misconception, okay? So I want to talk about Kevin Hines. Who has heard of Kevin? Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, if you haven't, I really recommend you look him up. Kevin Hines, Hines, dear friend, him and his wife Margaret, doing some wonderful work in this space. Hoping to have them at the national conference. Maybe I'll talk to the vice commander later about that, but we'll see. But anyway, he jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and lived. One of very few, right, that has done that. But he says on his way leading up, he told himself that if somebody came up to him and talked to him and asked if he was doing okay or tried to help him, he would not jump. So he's on the bus and he planned it out. I mean, he's on the bus, he's crying profusely. And he's sitting in the back of the bus and he's riding up, to the Golden Gate Bridge. And he is the last one on the bus. And the bus driver says, hey, come on, get off the bus, kid. Last stop. Crying. Doesn't say anything to him. Bus driver doesn't say a thing. Walks all the way. Has anybody been to the Golden Gate Bridge? Yeah. I rode my bike over it. The walk is quite extensive, right? Walks all the way up to the middle of the bridge. Crying again profusely, just crying. And he's standing there, and he's standing there for quite some time. It's very, very busy sometimes, right? Because tourists go across like I was. Go across, riding your bike, walking, whatever it may be. So a group of tourists come up to him, and a lady reaches out. Again, you got to picture it. I'm hoping you're picturing in your mind that he's crying and very distraught, and hands her camera, and hands her camera to him and says, can you take our picture? And stands there with a group of her friends, and they're, and he's like, sure. Goes over and snaps a couple pictures, gives it back, and off they walk. Not, 30 seconds later, he says, 10, 15 seconds later, he says he literally catapulted off the bridge. But he does say now that if they would have said something to him, if anybody, he wouldn't have taken his life or tried to take his life. So, okay. Very, very powerful story. And he tells it much better, of course, because it's his story. Adam, I'm going to have you talk about this one. Sure. Because I always, when I tell this, when I talk about this slide, I talk about Adam and what he's told me. So I'm going to have him do this.
So this is one of the things that has changed in how we look at suicide over the last 50, 60 years. So in the 1960s and 70s, 80s, we really thought, in the way I was trained in the 90s, was that a suicide was a symptom of a mental illness. And what we've really learned with new data and research and looking at actual data and not reconstructed data, we've learned that only maybe, I think the latest data is 42%, a new report that just came out of the DOD, 42% of service members who die by suicide have some sort of mental illness. And that's also an adjustment disorder. And an adjustment disorder is having problems with relationships or financial problems or legal problems. So what we know is that the number of people who die by suicide have a mental illness is probably closer to 40 or 50%. And that's important. Why? Because when I was taught, as a clinician, you're looking for somebody who has bipolar disorder, is manic, schizophrenia, delusional, and somebody who is really, really depressed. So we always would, Wendy and I, she was in some of the marketing of images around suicide prevention, and I always get upset when I see a cover for a suicide prevention book or manual or training, and there would be a service member's head crying and putting their hands, to their face and just completely distraught. And what we know in the military is that, a lot of service members die by suicide because of situational factors and not because of a chronic mental illness. And that's so important because of who we're looking for. So what I was taught was to look for somebody who's severely mentally ill, very depressed. In some cases, that can be true. There are people who have a mental illness, and suicide can be part of that issue. However, a lot of people don't. So instead of looking for the really, really sad person in the room, you want to look for everybody. Because one of the famous people that I've worked with out at Harvard, he would always say, you know what? You don't know you're suicidal until you're suicidal. Because it can happen quickly. Things can change. So again, we want to look for everyone. And that really opens up our vision, opens up our aperture on our camera. We're looking for everyone. We're not just looking for somebody who we think is really mentally ill. Really, really important. It's actually changed our complete perspective. Other countries were ahead of us on this game, but we're trying to catch up. A lot of different things can lead someone to attempt suicide. It's not just a mental illness.
Thanks, Adam. I always have him do it when we're together, talk about that, because I can't imagine trying to look in the room and find somebody who may be suicidal. How do you do that, right? So I want to unpack this a little bit because Adam touched on it a little bit about, especially in the civilian world, I call it, right? A lot of times they think that because you've deployed, you're at increased risk for suicide. So, or you deployed 5-6 times, you're at increased risk for suicide. I know my husband deployed 5 times. And from what I understand, he's not suicidal, but, like Adam said, you don't know until you know, right? But I do want to unpack it because it's not the number of deployments, okay? It's not how many times you've deployed or the length of your deployments. It's what you experienced during the time that you were deployed. So when you say it like that, I think it hits home a little bit more, right? And it's an easier way to talk to individuals that may not be associated with the military and kind of understand that. So I always try to tell people too, because a lot of people come up to me and say, oh my gosh, your husband was deployed 5 times? Yeah, he was deployed, 5 times. He's like, is he okay? Yeah, he's fine. And that's the thing is he didn't experience what a lot of other people experience. Right? Fortunately for him. So it's not the deployment, how many times they deployed, or the length of the deployment. It's what you experienced during deployment, which is pretty intuitive, I'm sure, to all of you. What's up next? Okay, I'll do a couple more and then I'll turn it back over to Adam. I don't know if all of you can read this, but this really kind of puts it into perspective for me. So this is not just a veteran issue, right? Suicide's not a veteran issue. When we have 50,000 people dying by suicide, almost nearly 50,000 people across the United States, almost 1 million people across the world. I can't even fathom that, 1 million people taking their lives. So it is an issue of humanity. And when you look at some of this information here, that, suicide takes more police officers' lives than crime, or more firefighters' lives than fire. And I'll read them for those that you may not see it, or more lives of service members, we should put, than combat, more people than car accidents, and really the natural causes, war, et cetera, together. So it really is incredible when you kind of put it into that kind of perspective. And it touches everyone. It touches everyone. So we used to think that, it touched, if somebody died by suicide, their immediate family, their close friends were all affected. Which 10, 12 people, somewhere around there, were pretty much affected by individuals that took their lives. But now we know it's much more expansive than that. So you think about the Legion itself, right? Think about if somebody took their life and how many individuals in Legion that could affect, right? Or in your community, or in your church, or, in other social support services that you use. So really, it affects up to 135 individuals. So when you look at the number of individuals that die by suicide daily here in the United States, and you times that, which is 135, okay, and you times that by up to 135 individuals, that's over 18,000 people a day are affected by one suicide, or 135 suicides, I should say. 18,000 people every day in the United States. And you can do the math with the 49, blah, 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 almost the 50,000 individuals that die by suicide. So it really is, when, again, putting it into perspective for us, right? Okay. I'm actually going to have you talk to us.
Okay, so this is, suicide does not discriminate. All ages, unfortunately, we're seeing that even children as young as 8 or 9 years old, I'm sure you've seen some of the media headlines. Small children are dying by suicide. Different countries, different genders, races, religious affiliation, income levels, it affects all of us. So finding veterans where they work, live, and thrive. So again, getting out of the hospital, getting out of the clinics, going and being with veterans. Where do veterans go? Being with them, engaging them where they are, and having those conversations with them. Connecting with veterans out in the community where veterans do all the things that they do.
We're trying to do a lot of things with our parks and our transportation. Trying to work with Uber and places like that too. So trying to get out there in that community.
Yeah. I touched on this a little bit, is using a common language. So when we get to the scale, which we're about ready to kind of go through and teach, is that we use words like suicide ideation, suicide intent, suicide behaviors, suicide plan. These are terms that the Center for Disease Control, CDC, also the World Health Organization, we all try to use the same terms. So when we're talking to each other, we all kind of know the same lingo. The American Legion, I bet you all have your own kind of set of words that you use with one another so you can relate to each other. Same thing with suicide. You want to be able to understand, well, what does it mean to have ideation? What does it mean to have an attempt? And we need to use consistent terms, very important.
Do you want me to do these one by one, because I don't want to be in the way of somebody?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, should I just?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
So move and you can see, because these come up one by one. We're going to go over the scale now, and the tool, the Columbia Protocol. So I'm going to, if I'm blocking, please move, or I could just go back and forth.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So hopefully, I saw that everybody received their bags. So in the bag should be a clipboard or a card, and so you'll have the scale. The scale, we could spend a lot of time talking about, the research and the data behind it. It's been studied quite a bit, and lots of detail, lots of, hair splitting has gone into what are the right words to use, what do we need to measure, what do we need to figure out to see if somebody's at risk for suicide. And you're going to see some different colors on the scale. You're going to see yellow, orange to red, so like a dashboard in the military.
If they don't have their card, which some people are saying they don't, use their clipboard.
Okay, yeah, your clipboard. They have the questions there for you. We use color coding. Yellow means low risk. The orange is kind of medium to moderate risk, and then red is high risk. And so obviously the red is the people that we really need to get immediate help to. The good news is only about 1% of people that you screen will be in that red level. Most people are going to be closer to that yellow, but I will tell you today that your job is definitely not done if they're at low risk. We want to keep talking to them and keeping them connected. Wendy told me something I love yesterday. She said, if you think that that person that you're asking these questions of, your instinct, your gut is telling you that you need to engage that person. You need to be with that person. Wrap them up in kindness. So you need to keep them, and you need to make sure they're okay. Just because they're yellow doesn't mean, okay, good to go. No, you need to keep that person engaged. So we're going to go through the questions. This scale, for a lot of people, they may not endorse the items on here, so it could take 2 minutes. If you find that that person's at high risk, it could take longer, especially if you're trying to get them care. But to actually go through the questions is very quick. And once I'm done going through this, we'll do some role play so you can get some practice, okay? So the first question is, have you wished you were dead or wished you could go to sleep and not wake up? So this comes from this idea, has anyone seen the movie Shawshank Redemption? It's one of my favorite movies. Morgan Freeman in that movie says, hey man, you're either going to get busy dying or get busy living. So what we think about it on this one is, where is a person at in terms of living or dying? Sometimes people kind of go back and forth on that. So this is a really good question to pick up, where is that person at living, dying? So that's the first question. The second one is, have you actually had any thoughts of killing yourself? So this is where it goes from, well, I don't really want to be here. Okay, well, we need to find out more about that. What do you mean? Have you actually had thoughts of ending your life, killing yourself? So we go to the next level. All right, and then if that is yes, then we're going to go ahead and ask some more questions. If that is no, that means you can go ahead and stop the scale, but you don't stop caring for the person. Can't emphasize that more.
And then tell them the percentage of individuals that may know.
Yeah, so it's about 1% of the people that are going to be in this kind of higher risk area. But it's really good to have this conversation with people. It's also a nice way just to engage a person on what's going on in their life. And what I usually try to do is I try to have a conversation with that person before we get into this. But it is that instinct, to ask these questions. But it's good to have a conversation. Hey, how's it going? What's going on in your life? And then you can kind of segue into these questions. Then number 3, so if number 2 is a yes, you go to 3. Have you been thinking about how you might do this? So again, we get to another level of severity. So you have thoughts of wanting to kill yourself. Well, are you going to do anything about it? Have you thought about doing anything about it? That gets to another level of risk. So that's number 3. Number 4, this is where intent, this is where, all the things that we've learned about suicide is, if you have thoughts and you have intent. So there's some part of that person, even 1 to 2% of somewhere in their body or in their mind, that they want to end their life, and they want to end their life. They have intent. They want to end their life. That's really, really important. So number 4, have you had these thoughts and had some intention of acting on them? Some people have thoughts like, well, no, I really wouldn't do anything about it. I just had a tough day, but I don't think I'll do anything about it. But people who say, yeah, I've had thoughts of killing myself, and yes, I want to do something about it. I do want to end my life. Number 5, have you started to work out or worked out the details of how to kill yourself, and do you intend to carry out this plan? So a plan. So yes, I have a firearm in my glove box. I know it's loaded, and I'm going to maybe access that when my family's not around. I'm thinking about that. I know, maybe I've started writing a suicide note. In some cases that happens. So there's a plan of how I'm going to do it. So you have thoughts, you have intent, and then you also have an actual plan of how you would die by suicide. And then number 6, this is kind of past behavior. And what we've learned is if a person has had past experiences with thinking about a method of suicide, gathering pills, maybe a rope, whatever it might be, thinking about a bridge you might go to or a firearm, this is that kind of preparing something that a person would use to die by suicide. So that's of concern as well. So again, we go from, yellow at the top, kind of vague thoughts of suicide. Then we start to escalate in those thoughts and behaviors. Number 2 is, yes, I actually have thoughts of suicide. Number 3, I am thinking about how I might do it. And then 4 is when we really start to change from kind of that low risk to higher risk, which is intent. Yes, there's a part of me that does want to die. And then number 5, I've got a plan of how I would die. So that's where we go from kind of low risk, and then we escalate into a higher risk situation. Any questions about this? We're going to give you a chance to practice and role play. Yeah. Yeah. And then usually when you have these conversations with people, you want to talk about when were you having these thoughts and when were you having these intentions and behaviors. So you ask about the kind of the time frame. Okay. You want to go ahead? Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of people are probably thinking, okay, how do I do this? When do I do this? Right? Like Adam said, it really is important to talk with the individual and build that trust, specifically if you don't know them, right? So you're just not going to, if you identify somebody that you think may be having a hard day, and you develop that rapport, you talk to them, of course, you're going to think of Kevin Hines' maybe story, right? You're not going to let that person go if they look like they're distraught or something's going on with them. You're going to ask them what's going on. Like, how are you doing, right? And you're going to develop that rapport. If you do think somebody may be suicidal, that's when you're going to use this tool, okay? And like Adam said too, only about 1% or so you're going to have to move on past number 2. Only about 1% will say yes to number 2, and then you will do the rest of the questions. And don't stop there, because if they say no to number 3, you're still going to ask the rest of the questions. That's important as well. But don't be afraid to ask these questions directly, okay? It is absolutely 100% okay to pull out your card or pull out your app on your phone, which will show you the app too, and you can download that. It's okay to do that. And the way that I do that is I don't give someone permission. If I think that they may be suicidal and I've developed a rapport and I'm having a conversation with them, I just say, you know what? I care about you, and I want to make sure, and I want to make sure that you're doing okay. I want to get you help. I'm going to ask you some questions. I don't ask them if I can ask them questions. I just say, I'm going to ask you some questions. And in order to make sure I'm doing it correctly, I'm going to pull out my card, or I'm going to pull out my phone and I'm going to follow it on my app, because it's important to me that I try to help you. It's just as simple as that. And then you go through the questions. But one reason is you don't ask for permission, because a lot of people are going to say no. No, I don't want you to ask me questions, right? Because what? I can handle it myself. I'm going to take care of myself. Well, a lot of times we know that people can't. And they actually, a lot of people do. They feel so much more relieved when they're able to open up, right? Want to avoid minimizing feelings. And the way I kind of explain this is, a lot of us have a story, right? We have a past. Some of us may have tried to take our lives, thought about suicide, whatever it may be. We don't want to listen to them and then say, you know what? This is what happened to me. Or my life, gosh, this is what I was thinking. It was so much worse than what you're thinking. Come on, dig out of it. You know, I mean, that's not the sort of thing that you want to say. It's okay to develop a rapport and say, you know what, I've been there. I've been there too. And this is what I've done to get where I am today. That's the good language around this, right? This is what I've done to get where I am today, and help them. And saying, I'm going to ask you some questions in order to do that. Okay. The big thing too is when you listen to somebody and they're telling you their story and you get them help or support, whatever they may need at that time, it's important to take care of yourself. Sometimes these stories may bring thoughts up in our own minds about things, right? Or maybe you just need to take time go for a walk, just clear your mind a little bit, talk to somebody else, not say, hey, Joe over there just told me this great, this story and I tried to get him help. But just say, you know what, I just talked with somebody. I got them help, but gosh, it really drained me. And that's okay. Get yourself help as well. Okay. So stay in the moment. What I find myself doing is, and body language. And what I find myself doing a lot is when I'm interested in something, I do cross my arms. What does that mean? I'm totally closed off, right? I cross my arms because it's comfortable for me, not because I'm closed off. Now, as soon as I do that, I try to drop my arms or I go like this or I do this. That's a little bit different than crossing your arms, right? So note that if you have that body language like me, take note of that. But stay in the moment too. It's really easy for us, and I still do it sometimes, that when you're trying to help somebody, sometimes you're like, okay, if they are suicidal, what am I going to do? So my mind starts thinking, right? What are those resources? Where can I take them? How can I help them? Because you want to get them help, but you want to try to listen to them. And eye contact is a really, really great way to do that. Obviously, you don't want to stare at the person because that's making them uncomfortable, right? But you want to make sure you're emulating what they're doing as well. So if somebody's sitting there and they're leaning, if you're talking to them, they lean a little bit in because they want your help. They want to like talk to you. You lean in just a little bit too, right? So emulate what they're doing so you're making them feel comfortable and you're feeling comfortable as well around them. Make sure that your voice is really steady, clear, that, again, just present, just being present. We know what that means. Paraphrase back to them. If they say, yeah, I've had a really hard day, but I know I'm going to go home and I'm going to see my kids and I'm looking forward to that. Then, down the road in that conversation, take note of that and say, if they're struggling about something, say, you know what, but I just heard, you have kids at home and that's a reason for living, right? That can give you hope. That's a reason for living. The other thing, too, is it's important to understand and really listen to their story as well for a couple of other reasons. One of our resources that we can go to is 988. And that is our national mental health and suicide crisis line. So that's our national line, 988. It's on your card. Has everybody heard of 988? Okay, good. Wonderful. Sometimes people don't want you to call 988 because they don't want to have to tell their story again, or they don't want you to get to call a resource or get them help because they don't want to tell their story again. It's important to listen to them too, because you know what you can say? You know what? That's okay. Let me tell your story. Let me tell that individual what you're going through, and you don't have to tell it again. And then a lot of times they'll say, okay, then let's do it. Let's call 988 or whatever that may be. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So what do you do if the person is at imminent risk? Of course, you're going to get them support. You're going to stay with them. We talk about a warm handoff. Does everybody understand what that is? Yep, a little bit. So a warm handoff is when you actually take somebody to get them help, right? Or you wait there with them until somebody comes and can support them. Or you're doing a call with them. If it's a three-way call, if you don't know how to do a three-way call, please learn how to do that, because you want to make sure if you're calling 988 that you're doing it through a three-way call, okay, if they're on the phone with you. And you know how to do that, because you want to keep them on the phone and call 988 so you're all on there together. And then at some point you'll probably drop and let them talk together. But it's that warm handoff. It's not saying, here you go, I'll write down the number of 988, go home and give them a call. Because what's going to happen? They're not going to call, right? They're not going to call, right? Or, hey, I know this clinic around the corner, super clinic. Why don't you go check in with them tomorrow morning? Okay? Probably not going to happen. Okay? One thing I do tell people too, unless you really know this individual and they're very close to you, I would not transport them in the car myself. I just wouldn't do it. It's a safety issue. You don't know what that individual is going through at the time. You don't know what's going to happen. But it is okay to call somebody with their permission and have somebody come in and support them, whether it's their spouse, their buddy, their friend, whoever it is, that can then take them to wherever they need. Okay? Adam, do you have anything to add? Okay. Alrighty, well, I think we're on the next one. And everybody who has a smartphone, pull it out, please, if you have not downloaded this already. So I'm going to explain how to download our app. And we have a Be the One app. So these right here, if you can open up your camera, hover it over one of the QR codes for our Android or iPhone users, hover it over. A link will pop up. In mine, it's orange. It is the same one that's on your cards, if you have it on your card. Mine's an old card. I don't have it on there. So thank you, ma'am, for pointing that out. You have the QR code in the back of your card. Hover your camera over it. It's on the bag as well. Yep. We've given you plenty of opportunities to be able to download that, so you have it with you all the time. And then a pop-up will come on. Just click on that pop-up and you can download it. And that goes directly to the Be the One, which is your app for the American Legion. Okay, good. And Adam has informed me I have to do role playing. Does anybody in the audience like to do role playing? Who said I do? Oh, good, because you know what? I'm going to have you take my place. Come on up if you want. See? I love that. Adam's going to get mad at me later. So this is important because this really is important because it's going to show us, it's going to give you an idea of how to use the tool, right? And start the conversation. And what we're going to do, just a heads up, is if we have time, yeah, we do have time, a little bit of time, we're going to have you do it amongst yourselves as well. So a heads up, so take note. Thanks. Do you want microphones?
We'll just speak loudly.
Okay.
We'll just.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So Judith, if you can go ahead.
Oh, you're going to have to speak louder than that.
Okay. If you can think about a situation or be a veteran who is going through some tough things. And
Okay, I'm getting to Adam this.
Get in character. The question. Okay.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. All right. Okay. So Judith, thank you so much for helping us with. You're going to go ahead and get in character and be a veteran. There you go. Be a veteran who's maybe going through some tough times, and I'm going to go ahead and go through the questions so that we can kind of see how this works. So just kind of tell me, what's a nice situation for this is being in the post, being at the American Legion post, and maybe you came in to the post, and then we can go from there.
Okay.
Okay. Hey Judith, I haven't seen you around for a while. How are you doing today?
I'm hanging in there.
Okay. You were coming in about every week. You would come in, we would have our bingo night, we would do things together, and I haven't seen you for a while, and I, just kind of been worried about you.
Yeah, I have my little doggie that I had when I separated from service, and she recently passed.
I'm really sorry. And I have a dog too, and we get really attached to dogs. They mean a lot.
All right, that was my transition, buddy, I guess, when I retired from the military, so it's a huge loss for me.
I'm sorry. How's it kind of affecting your life and how you're feeling every day?
Well, I'm single, I don't have children, so, she was, basically my side, my buddy, my comrade.
Okay. Well, it's hard to lose somebody like that. A lot.
Adam, can you speak up a little
Sure.
bit?
All right, Judith, I know you're going through a loss of somebody who's, your companion who you really relied on. I'm going to go ahead and ask you some questions just to make sure you're okay. All right. Have you wished you were dead or wished you could go to sleep and not wake up?
No.
Okay. So a loss heavy on the hearts, and maybe I haven't seen you for a while, so maybe just kind of dealing with the grief, the loss of your dog?
Yeah, I guess I have my comrades, so
Okay.
I have, reached out to them, so that has helped,
Okay.
doing other, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Have you actually had any thoughts about killing yourself?
No.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure you're okay. We all care about you a lot here at the Post. We want to make sure that you feel supported and that you're, we're always here for you.
I do.
Okay. All right. Any thoughts about maybe getting another dog or?
Not
No.
at this time.
Okay. All right. Well, we're here for you anytime you need it.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Nice job.
There you go.
Thank you.
You can split it up.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to split you up. And we're going to have you use the tool and do this role play amongst yourselves. And what I'm going to ask you to do, Andy, you're not out of this role, right? You're not, what? He can't do that, can he? His face is red. I'm sorry. I shouldn't put you on the spot. But try to get with somebody you don't know, okay? But if you want to get with somebody you know too, that's fine. But it really is important to do this, so I encourage you to do it. We'll give you about 15 minutes or so, just so you get comfortable saying the words, okay? And using the card. And really, it's as simple as that. And sometimes when you say it to yourself, I'll tell you, it's a lot different than asking these questions out loud to somebody else. It really is. So we're going to give you 15 minutes. If you guys can pair up. Thanks. Yes?
I have a question on the app.
Yeah.
So is walking us through a procedure?
Thank you. I had a question. Actually, he asked specifically, so how do you use the app? Are you going to walk through the questions in the app? Yes, absolutely. So the app up front will ask you a couple of questions. Are you a veteran? Are you under the age of 18? There's a reason for that. We're collecting data. I don't know who you are. Honest to God, I don't know who you are using this app, okay? But if you say yes to location settings, or if you ask the individual that you're sitting with, hey, can I tell them where we're at? It's still, I don't know who you are, but it provides the location of your zip code. So I know in your zip code, because sometimes with 911 or 988, my phone, we were at Fort Cavazos, Texas, a couple of times. I got my phone and it's a 254 area code, right? If they ping my phone, then I get resources in Killeen, Texas, not in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I live, right? So what this does, though, it's a geolocator that shows your zip code and where you're located. And if you identify that you're a veteran or that you're helping a veteran, what that does is that at the end of going through the questions, the nearest veteran resource will pop up. And all you have to do is click on it. Okay? And the phone number will pop up and you can make that phone call. Okay? If you identify as a civilian, say you're a veteran, right? But you're helping a civilian or someone that's not a veteran, then you say no to that question. I'm not helping a veteran. And then the nearest civilian resource will pop up. Very, very handy app. And I encourage you to use it wherever you're located. Every time I'm going somewhere, like I was playing with it last night to make sure that a resource in New Jersey popped up. And I do it because I'll go back to the app people and say, hey, it didn't have anything. Or, it'll always have 988 though. So always remember that. But thank you. And then it walks you directly through the questions. Absolutely. And you just use the question. And it's a yes or no. And if it's a yes to number 2, it'll take you through the rest of them, right? If it's a no, then I think it may take you to number 6, and then you can read that, and then it'll provide a resource of low, moderate, or high risk of where you are with that individual. So very nice. Thank you so much. I normally don't explain that, and I should have. So thank you. Okay. Got the card out and used it. It does make you feel a little more comfortable. And if you didn't do it here, go home and do it with somebody or a friend or or somebody just to make you feel comfortable. Like I said, if you voice it out loud to somebody else, it really does create that comfort level for you to be able to use it a little bit better and easier in the future. I'm going to do something because I was told that I don't post on social media enough, which I don't. I don't really post much at all. But I'm going to take a selfie with all of you. And I'd like that if you guys want to raise your hand with the number 1, that would be awesome. And I will tag the American Legion on it. And Adam and I will take a selfie. And I'm horrible at selfies too. So if you want to like get together or do whatever you want in the background, but I'm gonna take one. Yeah, bring out the cards too. Hold the card.
Yeah, hold it.
Whoa, wait, I'll get it. Okay, hold on.
You can go around the table, Wendy. Hey, be the one. Be the one. Use the right finger. Are you done?
Yeah.
All right, how about another round of applause for Wendy and Adam for the great training they brought us today. And how about a round of applause for Will Featherman and for Post 346 for being our host.
And I want to thank all my Monmouth County officers for being here. John, Bill Schultz, Victor's here. Thank you. Thank you, Monmouth County.
So I'd like to call up on Reverend Horn to give us a closing prayer. Uncover.
Heavenly Father, we united in prayer at this commencement of this American Legion meeting. May our shared purposes and dedication for this testament to the strength of our organization. May we continue to give our mission to be one to stop or prevent this selfish act that people might commit. May we all bless us in our efforts to share this program. Continue to keep us in your love. Guide us as we travel home. Keep us safe. Allow us to share and know that your love is with us. We know that you will allow us to leave the light on so that this could be an example to others. And so we ask that you bless us and bless the United States of America, we pray. All in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Will the Vice Commanders please retire the POW MIA flag? And salute. Two. Okay, so this convenes this part of our training this morning. I'll see a whole bunch of you in a little bit, up the road a little bit. Thank you all for coming. It was a great day with our Legion family. Thank you.